Well, good afternoon, everybody. Dr. Tim Terlep. Welcome to this week's 3 Minutes to Vitality. And this week we're going to talk about something that becomes a question around the office pretty frequently. And it's, why do I feel better? And why is my general health better when I've been under ongoing care in the office? I had a gentleman, I don't know, it doesn't matter, his name was Jim. And Jim actually a few months ago was saying, I've been under care at the office, I'm on maintenance care now. I've been coming in for 3 or 4 years now. And he goes, it's really fantastic, but is it related to my care? I don't get as many colds or flus. Matter of fact, I haven't had any. My allergies are better. Everything is better since I've been under regular care. And I couldn't help but laugh because Jim and I had been talking about that many times during the course of our care together. And it's like, of course. And he said, but how? And I thought, would that be something that'd be great to address today? Because there's been 3 studies in the last few years published in some peer-reviewed research materials that were looking at that very question. Because for so long we actually thought that the spine, the nervous system itself is incorporated that way, the central nervous system, and the immune system were separate organs. Well, what we know now is that's not actually the case at all. That they are actually interrelated. We now have a branch in healthcare that we call neuroimmunology. So the nervous system as it relates to immune function. So it's neuroimmunology and how those two, if I can use the word, handshake, right? Which is kind of interesting. And I heard a physician not too long ago, which I thought was great. He said, wow, because it's constantly true that our nervous system is eavesdropping on all the function of the immune system. And no truer words could be said. So what we have is you have these fancy things that are referred to as neuromodulatory chemicals. And there's one specific category called cytokines. And in a couple of these 3 studies, they would look at these fancy element of chemicals, part of the immune system response, called cytokines. And they were looking at the chiropractic adjustment. And what happens? Well, one of the things that we know is it's the stress response. When we get wound up, when we actually have stress either on the outside of our body, on the inside of our body, we have a chemical stress, a physical stress, an emotional stress. There's many different types of stressors that we get, but when we get one, we get a stress response. And 2 chemicals that get elevated a lot are adrenaline, that fight or flight chemical that we get, or we have another, we have adrenaline, and then we also have another one called cortisol. And cortisol itself is actually a more long-term chemical that happens. It happens short-term, but it builds up over time with a more protracted stress response. And that's what we see happen. And what happens is immune function decreases in the presence of these, without getting into all about how that works. But those 2 chemicals from stress actually decrease the body's ability to fight infection and disease by diminishing, it's called down-regulating our immune function response. Interesting. Well, what we now know as well is that the chiropractic adjustment on a small micro level is actually creating abnormal function, whether fixation or abnormal movement patterns of the spinal joints, change neurologic function to the point that it also creates the same stress response. And that's how we're seeing that happen, because we're seeing that stress response increasing when we have abnormal spinal function, because it loses the stimulation of a certain type of part of the nervous system called the proprioceptor. And when that happens, we see the stress response actually increase, and we again see adrenaline, we again see cortisol increase their levels, which then decrease immune function. What's interesting is that when they did these studies, all 3 of them actually documented that these fancy things called cytokine that stimulate immune function, actually for a couple of hours that they would follow after a chiropractic adjustment to change function of the spine, they actually would measure the chemicals in the blood for these cytokines, and they have found that the antibodies IgG and IgM, we had interleukin 1B, interleukin A, and we had a couple of other immune chemicals that we won't get into. I say those words and it's like, oh, why am I saying those words? Right? Because they're very large words. But they're chemicals related to immune function that are directly elevated after chiropractic adjustment, decreasing that local stress pattern, modulating those stress chemicals, and then that increasing the flowering of these cytokines, those neuromodulatory chemicals. Really cool stuff, because now we're seeing why our patients are enjoying these changes in immune function and greater sense of well-being, decreased expression of sickness, and more ease in the body. Really fantastic stuff and really great research. Something that I thought deserved to be addressed. So that's 3 Minutes to Vitality for this week. Look forward to seeing you next week. Thanks for watching.